Welcome back to the Tay Experience. Today we're going to be talking about the power of activism and history. So I'm Galle, joined with...
My name is Levi. I'm an intern here at TAYFam, and I go to Sanford High School.
And my name is Santy Hernandez, a host of Tay Radio.
Cool. So today, first, we're going to start with kind of a icebreaker to get into it. What'd you guys eat for lunch?
Today I had just meatballs, so like albóndigas in Spanish. That's what my family calls it when they make it.
I had a burrito for lunch. It was delicious.
Delicious.
What
Nice.
about you, Gal? What did you have?
Ooh, I had hot Cheetos for lunch.
Oh, that's it? That's all you ate?
Yep, that's it.
Oh my God.
Unfortunately, but it's fine. I think I have a nice dinner planned. Have you guys been to any protests or seen any activism recently, in person or online or?
Yeah. I like to organize protests a lot. So, I started my organizer journey around a year ago, or a year and a half. But I have attended protests in the past. So in the past 2 years, I've been to I'd say around 10, and I've organized 2.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's really nice to come together as a community because you're coming together for finding connectivity and things that you think should be empowered through protests. And I think having so much power and numbers rather than just one person is really important.
Mm-hmm.
You said seen or been? Is that what your question was?
Yes. Have you seen or been to any recent protests or activism recently?
I'm trying to think. I don't remember. I remember seeing one, but I don't recall what it was about.
Yeah.
The one that a lot of family members of mine did participate, and a lot of close friends. They did a recent one to protest for the Latino community, and they boycotted buying gas, buying grocery for one day. I did not participate in that specific one for that because I wasn't aware of it. But anyway, that day I learned that that's what was going on.
Was it the hands off when no one went to school or work or anything?
Yeah, I've done it before. But this one that happened, I didn't do it, but I was boycotting basically all the needs to show the impact the Latino community, specifically the Latino community has. Actually, I think it might have been any immigrant. I don't know. I don't recall very well. Mm-hmm.
When we drive by the Tesla stores here in Marin or anywhere, we've seen the big signs and the people screaming. But what do you guys think activism means to you guys personally? And it could be anything. What do you guys get from it?
Activism for me is a way to express myself. I think it's one of the biggest things it's the biggest thing that makes up my personality. So for activism for me is speaking out, but then a lot of people see it as just speaking out. But to me, I feel it's also actually immersing yourself into an experience and what you believe in. So you're fully committing yourself, and you're showing a bunch of loyalty to this one thing you have in specific. So I like to advocate, and I like to, I'm an activist for a lot of environmental justice related things, immigrant communities and how they're being treated. I think also a bunch of LGBTQIA different topics like that. I feel activism for me is much. I feel I'm kind of leaning towards a more leftist stance. So I'm not really I'm not an activist for other kinds of things, but I mean that's what a lot of people see activism as.
And how do you get your message across usually? Do you guys do a lot of social media, or do you guys do a lot of in-person things?
Well, I like to post a lot. I feel my Instagram is full of just quotes by people. I post a lot of quotes by MLK, Malcolm X. A lot of activists, I follow a lot of them, and I get so much motivation by them. I like social media as a platform. I like to debate people, actually. I debate a lot of my friends. I go to some rallies if there is. Recently, Charlie Kirk was in San Francisco State University, and I passed by, and I was just kind of there, and I was looking at what was going on. Because, I mean, it was nice, because I've never seen such a strong conservative person, quote unquote strong, coming into such a liberal city, and I felt as though it was important. Mm-hmm. And just putting yourself out there and not being scared is another form of activism that I enjoy.
Well, just so I wanted to read the definition of what activism according to Google is. The policy or action of using vigorous campaigning to bring about political or social change. So that's the actual definition. As for me, as someone who's been, how would I say this? My family were not from the States. We didn't grow up in the States. So activism here looks very different from back home. And back home, it's more of like it is what it is, and you can't really do much about it. And I think a lot of our community kind of keeps everything in. So coming here, for example, I can talk about like women's rights. Back home, the culture and the traditionally, it's like women are supposed to be at home, have kids, etc. That has, of course, changed over the years. So coming here and learning about women's rights, learning about immigrant rights, and learning about youth rights, et cetera, et cetera. I've been slowly understanding and getting my own understanding of activism. And for me, it's more about standing up for in general human rights. That's how I kind of look at it that way. And then of course everybody has their own thing that's really close to home. For example, if you ask me personally, I think the one place where I've been very, very an activist in a way, not extreme the way you would see people going, for example, the Tesla location. I'm not necessarily that type of activism person. I definitely advocate and talk about the reality of what an immigrant is, and talk about the history, which we will actually tie into the show. That's the way of activism for me. It's more of on the educational side, educating myself first, and kind of understanding how other people view things, and being able to say, I totally get that that's where you come from, but this is my story as well, and many others. But yeah, what about you, Galle?
Well, I've personally been a very hands-off activist. So, I kind of share right now the perspective that doing a lot of activism physically in all these places doesn't really accomplish much compared to the risk that you can, put yourself into. So I prefer like social media, quotes online and all that sort of stuff. But looking at my Israeli WhatsApp group chat, I see like the craziest forms of activism going on in Israel against the government right now, Bibi Netanyahu. I don't know what the exact situation is, but I do know that my family has been participating. Even my like 80-year-old grandpa and my grandma have been involved in that, and that means like every Friday going up and screaming and protesting and singing songs and all that. So I don't really have a bold definition of what like activism is, but I do know that it is for human rights, and I think no matter what way it's done, it does actually accomplish things. And I think that's one of my like weak points or areas of growth, is getting involved in activism myself, because I haven't really done that much so far. I've only really seen on the internet like what other people are doing. I've like looked through the window in the car. So yeah, I wish to join more clubs as a senior, and maybe do some more things.
Can I add something to that? I said human rights, and then I thought about it for a second. I think human rights for me refers to everything that affects us, how we live and everything. So that also includes environmental works. I'm really big on animal rights as well. For example, there's a lot of animals that are going extinct because of what we humans have done. So when I say human rights, I feel like to me that generalizes everything that affects us, because whatever animal goes extinct, some way it affects the what's it called? Is it the food chain? Is the food chain? I might be saying this wrong, but everything is connected. So if something something disappears or is gone, it will eventually lead to us humans.
Yeah.
But of course, that has so many other categories.
Yeah.
Continue.
So yeah, why do you guys think it's important for people, or I guess young people, to speak up even when things get a little bit more like dicey or uncomfortable? And just kind of in general, you guys can use your own experiences or perspectives.
Young people should be advocating. I don't know who's watching this, but you should be advocating. Especially if you're young, if you're the youth. Youth advocacy is so important because we're the next generation. If we don't make a change, then no one else is going to do it for us, because the people that a lot of older people, they're able to vote, they're able to do whatever they want now, but we're going to be able to do whatever we want in the future. And we get the choice to be educated or not on topics. We get the choice to put ourselves out there and really fight for what we want. So understanding that we as a youth can come together and make a change is drastic, and it's something, if anyone can understand and fully comprehend, is something so powerful. And when we finally realize and get together and know how much change we can make, that's the only time that the world can really change.
That's amazing.
Well, why is it important? Well, let's think about it for a second. Your experiences compared to our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, if you have that opportunity. I have great-grandparents that are still alive. They experience things very differently than we have. And a lot of the, especially political laws, were created during those time periods, right? So, for example, I'm going to touch on women's rights for a second. Back in the day, women were mostly known to be traditionally at home, raising children, etc. I don't recall, and please correct me, I don't remember, I think it's World War II, where women had to take in a lot of roles while men were gone. And that brought in where women realized that they were capable. I mean, I feel like they would have known that they were capable, but society didn't allow for that yet.
Yeah.
And then they got into the roles of what men would have been doing, but they had to because they were all gone, right? Most of them were gone. So that brought in where women wanted to work, right? And then they realized that they can also do this, right? Then that got a movement and led to women being able to work, et cetera, et cetera. Because reminder, back then women were not allowed to vote. There was so many things. Then now, if we stick to those laws back in the day and apply it to now, it doesn't work, because you and all of the previous generations, now women are working, right? And so that's why youth, it's important for us to advocate, because we're experiencing things differently compared to previous generations.
Yeah.
And then that's where, if there are laws that were enforced back in the day that caused more damage than improvement, we have the opportunity to say, hey, I know that's what worked back then. We have evolved. We have made some changes. That necessarily doesn't apply anymore. We can talk about immigration as well, right? Now there's a huge population of immigration here that apply or have a big impact on the economy of the United States, and also just in general labor stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of the laws that we're applying just doesn't work anymore. So that's why we as a youth have to advocate for things for us and for those that are coming after us.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Definitely.
I hope that made some sense.
I feel like the older generations would counter, against the younger generations by saying, oh, well, they're too young. They don't really know what they're saying. Do you guys think there's like a how young is too young, or do you think anyone can be involved no matter how young you are in activism? Where would you draw the line per se?
I think anyone is allowed to have an opinion, Yeah. Even if you're super young and you're
anyone
I don't know.
can make an educated
Yeah,
opinion.
I mean, it depends on what kind of education you get and what you're interested in, what you fully believe in. That's something that you should advocate for, unless it's taking away human rights. And
I think it also includes your experience.
yeah,
right?
how you grew up.
Yeah, your experience I'm very open and about it. I'm an immigrant here, and yes, if you were to ask me a couple years ago, when I was 15 or stuff, and you asked me about immigration, I can tell you how painful it is to live without your family. I don't need to be 30 years old or 40 years old to understand that. So that could be an example of being too young to know what I'm talking about. Well, I lived it.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's the economic side. People might say, well, you don't have a job yet. You don't know what it is, how the economic policy affects you. Yeah. Okay. But I knew what it was when, there's a lot of families that have experience where their parents couldn't afford buying food because they had the rent to pay or stuff like that. Or it's other issues, right? So I think the experience of what people go through or what they see has it's a big driving force of why they speak up. Yeah. Right? That's what activism is, to see change, because not necessarily you experiencing it. It's also people around you that are experiencing it and how you want to see a change. So I don't think it has an age.
Nice.
Yeah. To add on to that, there's like also so many like the people that are making these policy makers, they've never really like experienced things the way some people that are being affected by different policies they're putting out are, like, I'm not saying every single policymaker is like some extremely like rich privileged person, but right. I'm saying most of the time that is the case, and it sucks because there's like for example, I could take like DEI being taken away, like all of these programs that are helping people that are being taken away currently because of the administration. Those people have never like probably like experienced what it's like to not have enough money to buy food, or having to like rely on going to a food bank, for example, or having to use EBT in order to get food, or having a program if a child has a disability that not having like the education of or like understanding as to why people need these programs.
Can you explain what DEI is?
So it's kind of like, like when you have, it's kind of like a specialized help financially for people. There's currently like a bunch of companies who are like against it and don't like support DEI. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna go into that, but it's like it's like different programs that are incorporated in the.
It stands for diversity, equity, inclusion. So
yeah, and also those words are being banned, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of programs that go with diversity, equality, and.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say something, but I forgot.
Was it about that or?
No, it was just before that. It was unrelated. Let me see if I can remember that. Oh yeah. Okay. So I was gonna mention back to your point on like policymakers being those like richer, more privileged people. That oftentimes I feel like is the case. After studying American history in class, I feel like we've seen a lot of times these sort of like protectors that limit other people. So they will limit the woman from voting. They will limit children from school sometimes, especially females. They will prevent immigrants from coming into the country, saying things like, oh, well, they're bad for the economy, even when there's research proving that immigrants help the economy.
Yeah.
So there's all these sorts of ideas that these protectors get wrong that are really just trying to keep a divide in society and just stay on top.
Exactly.
And I don't know. It's very much up to interpretation of if those people are, making points that are real or not. But the truth of the matter is that we should sort of think for ourselves on if what people are saying isn't just like repeating what the older generations have been saying. Oh, we need to keep these people out and exclude these people. Is that still going to happen today, or are we going to make a change and kind of spot when people are being excluded from certain things or not? So I don't know.
Yeah.
There's always that sort of like divide politically, and also just there's the rich versus the poor, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Those in power and those not in power.
Yeah, there's always that weird divide.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just kind of yapping.
That's
but
a really good point, honestly.
yeah. So when you guys do decide that something you see is wrong in society, when you guys see an injustice, where do you guys see the most effective action? Do you guys see it in peaceful protests, or do you guys see it in disruption and chaos, or do you guys see a middle ground that uses both? Because we've seen the example of the BLM riots and the right side arguing that the BLM riots are going too far and looting and actually being harmful, and we've seen the left talk about the right in their protests, ALM, or I don't,
Yeah. I think all types of activism, protests, anything is effective. It doesn't have to be big. I think I learned from organizing my first protest from a mentor I had is that, like, even if it's like 10 people, if it's 5 people, those people are still willing to go out there and attempt to make a change with you. So as long as you have some sort of like support, then you'll be fine. And like if you understand why you're doing it in the first place, then that's like even better, because you're putting yourself in a position where you're like fighting for something that you care about, even if like because it's not about how many people show up, it's not about how many times you do it, it's about the reason as to why you're doing it, And I feel like when you were talking about like during the question, when you were saying like, oh, like sometimes it's like politically divided, the different ways in which people can protest, that's also like a huge factor. Like many people just want to blame each other for things that they think are wrong, and then in reality it's like so many people can have differing opinions, and if you go out of your way to like cause harm, like I could take like the White House riots as an example. A lot of the media like was talking about that, but not in the way that so many like Black Lives Matter riots were being put into media. I feel like it can really just be what kind of media you're consuming in a way too. Who's posting what you're seeing and why you're seeing it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
You made a really good question. That is a little tricky in a way to answer from my point of view, because I have only really been to one protest that you're talking about, where it's like, and it was the one that happened here for Mateo. I don't know if you guys know that story. Do you? So
no.
There was just a very harsh incident that happened here in the Canal area, where a police officer arrested a civilian very aggressively in the Canal area, and they were just drinking. They weren't necessarily disrupting anyone. Of course, there's rights about where to drink and stuff, but just how that situation was addressed and put on was not a good. The Latino community did not take it very well. Not just the Latino community; it was just not a great experience to watch. So imagine to live it. So we, as MCM, there was not MCM itself, but there was a protest done with a lot of my coworkers, and I went to it, and we went to the SRPD, and there's a lot of people, and it was a very interesting experience as for me. For me, the way I protest and activism for me is more on, again, the educational part. I like to learn. Yeah. I like to understand both sides. And there's actually more than two sides. There's like so many. I like to learn, and I see what I can do in my personal life. If there are any changes I can make, I don't need to blurt it out to everyone necessarily. If there are any changes that I can do on my own, that then when people look at me, they're seeing the change that I'm doing. Does that make sense? Yeah. For example, I'm gonna give you guys an example. I'm really big on animal rights. I'm not 100% the best at it, but there are things that I've tried to educate myself in environmental rights as well. For example, instead of buying plastic water bottles, you can buy water bottles like these. I made that switch in my life a while ago. Am I perfect at it? No, but I do that. So that's my way of peaceful and more effective protest and activism for me. But in bigger topics like immigration, when community comes together, it does do something. You can see the power, how many people it affects. The other way I find the most impactful way is storytelling. Because we can shout and scream. In my perspective, we can shout and scream, and if you're talking to someone who's political and you're just screaming and shouting, they're like, oh, they're just frustrated about it. But if we really tell you, this is my story, this is what I've gone through, maybe you don't understand it, you don't get why I'm fighting for it, well, here's why, here's what's going on. For me, that's a more effective way of activism. But yet again, I have not participated enough in actual walkout protest to say more about it.
Yeah. I think to add on to that, I feel like there is like so much good and peace and stuff, but then there's so many years where it's like we keep doing that to ourselves. We keep telling ourselves we're gonna make peace with these people. They're not gonna make peace with us. So what's the point? And if you use all these methods, then it's the best, because you're not putting yourself in a position where you're constantly having to forgive these policymakers, these big corporate companies. You don't have to put yourself in a position where you're like, they're just doing this because they have to. They don't have to. And you're free to speak about it, and you're free to do whatever you want about it. And that's what I think is so powerful about protesting. It doesn't have to be one thing, and not one thing is always going to be effective. But if every single kind of person does whatever they think is effective, then that's the best type of
I agree with that 100%.
protesting.
Like, there are people that are going to be walking out. There are going to be people who are sharing things on social media. There are going to be people who are educating others, sharing their stories. So it all comes in pieces together into a big movement.
I think the best way to like really get someone who thinks they're right is to use some form of logic and just make them understand that actually what they're saying might be wrong.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds very simple, but I think the problem with screaming and it's dangerous and all to do all these flashy things that look very dramatic on the media, but also it just, in the mind of the person who disagrees with you, reaffirms their belief that they're right, and that the protesters are just protesting and they don't understand why they're protesting. They're just doing it. So yeah, I think whether it be art or social media or education, any sort of protest that has truth or like a logical backing is the best way to say, hey, you're wrong. This is why you're wrong. Maybe you should, open up and see my side a little bit more. That's the best way to like find that middle ground per se. Yeah. Let's talk over more about injustices that we see in school, because I know you talked a lot about your clubs and a lot of the there's been a lot of events as well, like anti-Semitism at Redwood, and
what is that?
I don't know the exact experience, like what happened, but I do know that I believe a teacher said something that was anti-Semitic during class, some sort of comment, and it shaped a whole lesson that everyone across the TAM district had to go through to learn about anti-Semitism and go really in depth.
I'm gonna.
Anti-Semitism, I think, would be defined as anti-Jewish, primarily Jewish, if I'm not mistaken, speech or sentiment. Although I don't know, is it all religions or is it just Judaism?
Discrimination, hostility or violence against Jews as Jews.
I see.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't know what you were referring.
Yeah, no.
Thank you for clarifying.
I guess a lot of people at school also blindly say terrible things. So I think education in general is just the best way in school. But how do personal experiences shape your guys' activism, such as seeing injustice at school or in your family? How have you guys? I know you talked a lot about the immigrant community, and I don't know. You guys have any personal stories about that?
You want me to go first? Or you want me? I think for me right now, the one that hits home the most is the immigration part, because my family, we are like legally allowed to be here, but there is someone very special to my heart that is having complications with that. And I really didn't understand a lot about immigration policies and why policies are made until last or 2 weeks ago. I learned from our lawyer that in order for someone very special, that special person to stay, and I'm saying special person because I don't think I'm allowed to say it at the moment, has to leave the country. And they have to be out of the country for 10 years. That is their punishment. And it hit home because that person, for me, if I think about 10 years, and if I ever get married and have kids, that person will not be able to be here in the States for any of that. I can travel. My family can travel. We can go back and forth, but there's a separation of family, and that person is a center of my world. So it's hard. Yeah. And when we learn about the reason why, the education part of why the current administration is doing what they're doing because of the immigrants, I said, man, it's tricky because I see their point, but then I also am going through this as a family. Yeah. And I say it's unfair. I've been using that word a lot. It's unfair because in my head, I'm like, that's not who this person is. I get what the administration is saying, why they're saying it, but that person doesn't follow into that category. But because of a certain group that they are targeting, it means that this person who has nothing to do with that is put into that in one whole category. Does that make sense? Yeah. And that's a huge injustice for me. And I'm not the only family. We're not the only family. There are many families who go through the same thing. That person can be doing the exact same thing. They can be paying taxes. They can be providing jobs. But when it comes to the legal and law stuff, there's no wiggle room. And that can feel really, you can feel very powerless. And I can see why a lot of people lead to protesting and activism. Yeah. And for me, that's the personal thing that touches home. And especially because we work at a nonprofit, we see a lot of fear in the community about their status here. And it's not that they can't go back home. Yes, they can. But imagine you growing up here all your life, and a lot of the community only speaks English as well. Going back to a country where they don't necessarily know the culture and language 100% can be really scary. And specifically the separation of family, right? You have moms and dads who are leaving their kids. You have kids who are leaving their parents. It's a whole messy, messy thing. So that would be the injustice that I'm seeing and living through currently right now. What about you, Levi?
I feel like for me, it's one of the biggest things that is like really like hurting me. I interned at a national park, and aside from Tay, and there's so many things about like closing them down, and I've seen so many employees like leave. Well, not by choice, but since they are a nonprofit. As for the Golden Gate National Park, there's been so many people that are leaving. We had this entire project that we were going to do. It was going to be a gear shed, so free gear for people, for families that wanted to come to the center, and it won't be able to be done because of the new administration's policies. So a year's worth of, no, actually 2 years worth of planning and researching and asking for grants will go to waste because, well, hopefully in the future it will be implemented, but at the current moment it's not going to be plausible. And there's so many like rangers going away, and they're amazing. Without rangers, we can't have parks. Without parks, there won't be any restored nature. And there is in some cases, but when there's like literal government agencies that are going against people that work in these creative fields that are benefiting people, it can be extremely like saddening. And I know like you can relate to that as well, I think.
Absolutely. My personal experience ties perfectly into what you guys were actually saying just now. Because, well, first of all, we know what DOGE is, right? The Department of Government Efficiency. That's like the Elon Musk and Trump agency to make tax cuts cut taxes and lower the spending of the government and make the government more efficient. And I understand that, and I think, sure, yeah, we should decrease government spending. Maybe we're in a huge amount of debt and we should save money. But at the same time, why scientists? Why researchers? Why not maybe the military? And the reason I say this, well, is because of my personal story, right? Or my mom's story, I guess. So my mom, she's been working at the VA for 19 years now. And it turns out that if you work for 20 years, what happens is you get your pension fund.
Yeah.
So she's right at that last home stretch of work and she can get there. But now she has to log everything she does for, someone to oversee that she's been efficient enough and doing enough work. She works more than my dad. She works a crazy amount of time, and I think that she deserves to have a job. And I think she's a PhD. She's been very devoted to her field. And, it just, as you can hear me talking about it with emotion, it makes me very upset personally to see the DOGE actually play into account because, I'm personally affected. My mom's personally affected the most. And so, she's always on edge, hoping that she can keep her job till the end of the year. Because at any time the government can decide to cut, I don't know, I think it's been 15% or 20% of researchers so far that have been cut. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm hoping that she's not going to be part of that number anytime soon. At least hopefully she can get to 20 because, by the end of this year, so like a couple of weeks before the next year, which is when she gets that fund, is when they're doing like some sort of like reevaluation. So it's like, really, really scary. But, I think that's an opportunity for protests and activism. That's why we've seen the anti-Tesla and anti-Elon sentiment rise. And I think that, those in power can do whatever, they have the power to do. So Elon Musk and Trump are in power, so they have the power to do those things, and hopefully the other two branches of government soon will go into history. Will, check that out and make sure they're not abusing this power.
Yeah.
Because that's affecting me, and I guess that's affecting you, and that's affecting you.
Yeah.
Heavy stuff. You made a good point that I want to touch on as well. And you said, yes, we should be making sure that we're not overspending money that we don't have. But also, that's what I said at the beginning when I was talking about my special person. Because of a certain group or misspending on one area, it affects those that actually are doing great work. So I'm not saying that every program is good. There are some maybe programs that we shouldn't be spending that much money in, but because there isn't research done by the administration, right? There isn't going deep down and finding out who does this affect, why are we doing this, like what's it for, and it's just cutting, then it creates bigger problems that you don't see right away unless you do some research and understanding of it.
And the fact of the matter is that even doing those cuts that they have planned will like take away an insignificant amount of spending. I don't know the exact number, but it actually isn't really that relevant compared to all the spending on the main things like the military, and there's the medical, Medicaid, Medicare. There's so many other things that are like 99%, and this is the 1% that they're focusing on. That's
what I'm saying. There's
exactly
not homework done by the administration,
so
not just on the numbers, but really at the work. Like what's it for? Some of these are health related, or research about preventing certain things from getting worse health wise. These are important things, but it takes more on the administration side to really do research, and that's where the community comes in, and it's like, hey, wait a second, what are you doing, right?
yeah.
But continue, giving it back.
No, yeah. All right, guys. So we're towards the end of the show. Do you guys have any last comments or things you guys want to say before we end it?
No. Well, I guess when we realize that there's the majority of us are the ones that are being affected by these policies, the more scared that these policymakers, these people in power, will be. So come together and fight for what you believe in.
Yeah, I'm going to say something that my mentor tells me. He says that he would like for us, when he talks to us, a little group of people that we are, for us to care about each other and not really look at the skin, but really look at the people. How is it being affected? And I stand by that, because in the way he explains it is, I don't know at the top of my head, but he says, I would love he'll throw it out in random ways. He'll say, I would love the Muslim woman to care about the Latino men, and the Latino man to care about the Jews, or the Jews care about the Muslim people, everything around. So he said the reason why, because it's not about your skin, it's about who you are as a person. And if we remember that, then I don't need to wait for a policy to affect me to care about it for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But rather, how is it affecting you as a person? And I see you, and I don't care about where your skin is, but more about who you are and what you're giving to the community. And that way we can come in together as a whole individually, right? We make up a whole. So to everyone is out there, I know that these times have been really challenging for many. We're all going through different things. Many things affect us. I really encourage you all to understand your side and the opposing side, for you to have a better understanding. And it makes you more powerful. The information you have makes you more powerful, because someone can come up to you and say something, and it can be easy for them to tear you down. But if you're strong and you know what you're talking about, it's harder for them to bring you down. So I encourage you all to stay strong and speak up about what's hurting you and those around you.
I'm not going to tell you guys what activism or protests to choose or what opinions to make. I think you guys know what you know. And as my favorite teacher used to say a lot, you guys are who you are when nobody's looking. So that means make the decision for yourself, and use what you know to pick the right side, the side that you believe in, that will be best for, not just yourself, but for the whole world, whatever that is. And and in general, just stay more active, protest more. And
thank you guys.
It's a great discussion.